Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Impact and Coffee. My name is Robert Nelson. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the program manager for Pivotal in Mexico. I'm joined this morning with our lovely co-host, Michael Green. Hi, Michael. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Michael Green. I'm from the New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association, and I'm the co-host for this event as well. So welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's conversation on housing and eviction.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. As folks are entering into the room, if you're a non-panelist, if you could mute your video, you're already on mute yourselves in terms of your audio. We just want to make sure that we're focusing specifically on our panelists. So please go ahead and turn off your videos if you're a not panelist. Michael, could you tell the folks who are new to the audience, and we know we have some regulars here, but what Impact and Coffee is?
Definitely. We're just a welcoming conversation where we bring nonprofit organizations together so we can kind of share tips and tricks and best practices, and maybe even talk about some of the issues we're having and brainstorming solutions. So Impact and Coffee is basically a thrice monthly meetup group for nonprofits to kind of talk about what they're going through and so forth. So yeah, that's kind of why y'all are here today. And then one other thing I'd like to mention is today is Gratitude Tuesday. So we would encourage you all to share something that you're grateful for in the chat. It's always a great opportunity to kind of think about the positive stuff that are going on in the world. So I guess I can start by saying, I'm kind of happy that there's a little winter weather coming through right now. I think we've been spoiled with our perfect weather for this winter, but we also know that it's important to have the snow and the precipitation and the cold weather because that's what winter is. So I'm grateful for a little bit of a change to the regular scenery. So Robert, do you have anything to add to Gratitude Tuesday?
I am grateful that I am inside my warm house this morning because it is a little chilly out. And so I'm going to ask folks too, if you could, please turn off your video, or we'll turn it off for you. And please introduce yourself in the chat, name, organization, and what you're grateful on Gratitude Tuesday this morning. And with that, we'll kick it off to introductions. I'm going to hand it to Elena just to kick us off this morning. Good morning, Elena, and welcome to Impact and Coffee.
Thank you so much, Robert. It's great to see a bunch of people in these Impact and Coffee meetings. I'm Elena Gonzales, Senior Director of Policy and Community Engagement for Homewise. Thank you.
Thanks, Elena. Justin?
Hi, I'm Justin Rogers. I'm part of a group that just sort of started up last fall called the Renters Coalition of Albuquerque.
Thanks, Justin. Jess or Jessica?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jess. I am a second year law student at the University of Utah College of Law. I am part of a clinic called Justice Lab, and we have been working on government identification and the lack of it, and it's the problems it causes in accessing social services.
Thanks, Jess. Appreciate it. And last but not least, Gilbert Ramirez. Welcome, Gilbert. Good morning.
Good morning, Robert. Buenos dias, everybody. My name is Gilbert Ramirez. I am the Deputy Director of Behavioral Health and Wellness Programs for the City of Albuquerque, and I'm here today to share a little bit about our eviction prevention services and what we're doing as a whole for the city. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Gilbert, and welcome. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see some familiar faces on the call. Also, just want to note, too, we're calling in from occupied TIWA territory. It's important to recognize those who came before us. And also that acknowledgement also means that we must take action and get involved with more Indigenous work that's happening in our communities every single day. So get involved with Indigenous organizations like Pueblo Women Rising or Red Nation. There are plenty of them here in New Mexico. So please, please, please find out more. With that, we're going to launch into questions. So, the pandemic has only exacerbated existing inequities in our community. The housing crisis has been going on way before the pandemic was going on. And so for our panelists this morning, we're going to ask this of all of you. How have you seen this playing out in terms of its impact in our communities in particular? And how is your organization addressing all of this? And I will jump to you, Justin, first.
Yeah, sure. I think certainly the pandemic has created a lot of difficulties for people, and especially if their work situations have changed or other things, requiring additional childcare or things that make it tough for people to make their rent payments every month. And our organization is really a grassroots bottom up, started with just a conversation of several people who were had different sort of like experience with people in this sort of these struggles. I'm a renter myself and doing okay as far as making rent, but I know many other people are not getting it every month, and they're very unclear on what their rights are, what sort of orders coming from landlord are things that they need to respond to right away, or things that they can seek other sorts of action with. And we just want to provide a safe and supportive space for people to ask those questions. And, maybe in some cases where the landlords are sort of bad actors in the space, for people to have the ability to organize together and use their power to assert their rights. That's sort of where we're starting with things, but there's many ways we can go from there.
Thanks, Justin. I really appreciate. I just want to really appreciate too the tenants' perspective around this housing crisis as well. There really aren't many groups that represent tenants and renters around Albuquerque, or especially around New Mexico. So it's so important that you're here today. I'm going to pass to Elena. Could you just talk a little bit about the impact you've seen in our communities and what Homewise is doing to address some of that?
Sure. Thank you, Robert. Yeah, I think it really is important to look at, these inequities, and especially racial inequities here in our communities. And it's interesting what we have seen. Homewise, typically our main mission is to help people, build financial wealth through homeownership, getting to that ultimate goal. But during this time, during the pandemic, we have seen kind of these inequities creep up, and one of the most vulnerable communities and that we've seen are folks who they've typically been Hispanic, Spanish speaking only, many immigrants, but it will have bought their home on what we call a real estate contract, which is owner to owner financing. And so that has reared its ugly head because they don't have maybe a traditional mortgage where they can work with their mortgage servicers and work something out, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But it's kind of scary. They just don't have any legal recourse. If they miss some payments, that owner can just foreclose, and they're out of that home pretty quickly. So we did see some of that pop up, and it's continuing to do so. And a lot of those families don't understand the terms of their real estate contract that they signed. And so we are providing more emergency mortgage assistance payments to them as well, to those who have a real estate contract as well as a traditional mortgage. But it is interesting how times like this, you see things where you kind of didn't pay attention to those before, those vulnerable populations. But we are now, and we're doing everything we can to also help that population and other non-English speaking minorities who may have found themselves in the same situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Elena. I'm, Filipino, so I know for a lot of immigrants and refugees, it's hard to get into housing because of the language access or language access service barrier. So I appreciate you lifting that up. Jess, help us out with this question.
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting when it comes down to the government identification. It seems like you would think everyone would have one, and there's just a massive amount of people who don't have them or get evicted and can't access it. They lose it in those processes. And something that's happening in COVID that has been really harsh on communities, especially minorities and those experiencing homelessness, is that they're, for one, is not, as Elena was talking about, accessibility to, translations if you're a non-English speaker. And then on top of that, there aren't really walk-in appointments anymore to be able to go in and get an ID. And what's happening is that you need an ID to get an ID. And then you need an ID to get housing subsidies, to get a job, all the basic necessities that allow you to have stability, you cannot get without an ID. And the whole process to getting an ID is just massively confusing. It's kind of like a step-by-step holding people's hands with service providers to get those IDs. And if you can't get one for whatever reason, you're unable to get, subsidies for housing to help you pay your rent right now or anything like that. It's kind of a really big issue right now.
That's really helpful, Jess. I appreciate that. Gilbert, could you talk a little bit more about what y'all are doing?
Thank you, Robert. We're coming upon the anniversary in March when I think everything shone. The city has always had an eviction prevention kind of services for our community at a much lower we are now. But the good news to that was it allowed us to build off a program when federal money released, and we did get a hold of some other dollars to the community for those most in need. But what it also highlights, as we were talking about inequity, our processes and procedures. The ID issue was really huge, and based on the funding requirements that we have, whether it's federal funding, some of those requirements we can't change or shift, and so we weren't as able to be as flexible as we wanted. But when the CARES dollars was released, we were already on top of this issue, understanding which individuals were being denied access to dollars just based on criteria. And we worked very hard with our Office of Immigration as well as with our Office of Financial and Consumer Protections to really see how could we restructure our criteria, make sure that we qualify as many individuals as possible. Our goal was, to get the CARES dollars out the door, but reverted. And we're administration in the new year that people who do ours had the option to kind of extend that time. But we were working information that was given to us at the time, which was your money December 31st. So whatever's not, already allocated, you could potentially lose it. So we had to learn a lot. Much what we've added is a lot of our information now is translated in multiple languages, probably about 7 or 8 different languages. We were able to hire temp staff, bilingual staff, primarily Spanish speaking, because that was the biggest population we were seeing. But we had to really restructure our program and look at how we added individual, very strategic planning around marketed our information based on what we saw need and neighborhoods where renters were. So we were pulling a lot of that data together with our partners to be on how do we get this information out. Geofencing today can be a very scary thing, but it's also very helpful when you're trying to target certain parameters and zip codes to get information out. We're continuing to use to make sure that we're pushing it out to the areas that we're seeing our need the most. So I cannot speak enough. We pushed a lot to be on the Spanish radio. I think this and this administration has allowed us to say we will push the envelope to make sure our entire community is represented here and pockets. And that's typically, what happens. Individuals who know access to services will get that. And still a lot more to do. We're not perfect at it, but we are working to make sure that those communities who have been, just trying to survive. And the biggest inequity really is that it's unfortunate individuals are having to choose how their survival will be, whether they're going to focus their money on food, gas, their vehicle, and or pay their rent. And I will say that, the issue around the moratorium is huge. It is set to expire at the end of this month for the federal. We're very fortunate here in New Mexico. Supreme Court is the authority over that, and that does not have a expiration date. And we do hope that the legislation session, now that it starts, will start to make sure that, it covers a little bit what actually happens in the courtroom. But those are the protections. And also, again, going back to inequities, not everyone fully understands what these moratoriums mean, how they protect them, or how they actually translate into the court system. So we've been working again to make sure that we're working with our partners, educating them on their rights and what to say and what to do, to the point of, I now have an eviction court date, right, which can definitely happen. One other inequity that we've heard from our is that, technically, if your lease is up to expire, you're not being evicted. But your landlord could choose to say, I don't want you anymore, and therefore we're going to go ahead and terminate your lease and get somebody else in here. And that's kind of a loophole to this moratorium and how people are being protected. So a lot of education, not only around access to the funding and the resources, but what does that legal process look like? How does that affect you? So I'm glad to be able to share what we're doing, and I appreciate all the partners here today because we need everyone kind of tackling this together.
Thanks, Gilbert. I appreciate it. I'm going to pass to Michael just to ask our next question.
Thank you. Thank you all for those great responses. So one thing that we've noticed in doing our Impact and Coffee special session on COVID stuff is all of the beautiful partnerships that have been created during this time, people trying to make their, stretch their dollars and their organization go as far as possible. This next question for the panelists is about partnering. And it's, how has your organization partnered with other groups to address these challenges or another's needs? What suggestions do you have for people or organizations or businesses looking to partner with you all? So I'm going to go ahead and start with Elena. If you can tell us about some of the partnerships that you all have created in the past 9 months or so.
Thank you, Michael. It's interesting. This does bring up quite a positive light, in my opinion, on, when COVID hit last March and April, we were probably all in shock and trying to figure out what to do, how to help people, what's going to happen, all these unknown questions. And so Homewise kind of stepped back a minute and, being in this industry in housing and home ownership for so long, we were worried about, okay, we cannot relive the Great Recession and the housing crisis that happened in 2008 to 2012. We've got to step up and figure out, who do we need to partner with? Who can we bring in and on board to really raise some immediate funds for the emergency mortgage assistance program that we have? Really, if you think about it, something like this is totally unprecedented. I worked in the last crisis trying to help people avoid foreclosure, and with great partners like United South Broadway. I think they're in the audience today, but they do a lot of foreclosure prevention counseling and legal services. So when this hit, and we started raising money for this, meaning, hey, if your income's been affected by COVID and you lost your job, your hours, we will pay your mortgage payment for you. Again, I wish this was, around before, but I think that servicers and organizations like Homewise really partnered quickly. And so we were using Homewise funds, and very, very soon, all we had to do, we told the city of Santa Fe what was going on. They ponied up. The city of Albuquerque, Albuquerque Community Foundation, Santa Fe Community Foundation, Wells Fargo, we just kind of leveraged funds here and there. And not that these funders had gazillion dollars, but it really is building on each other. It's those building blocks partnering together to do something like this. And some of these smaller foundations, they're still willing to help us. And I think it's a kind of a different take on partnerships right now, Michael, to figure out how can we help folks stay in their home, especially now more than ever. And it's been very successful. So I will talk about that more as we go through this as well, and share some links on how folks can get that help. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. It is very positive to listen to these partnerships and the generosity that people that are really coming forward in this time. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so Jess, same question to you. What have you seen with partnerships being created?
So I think that partnerships are probably the most important part of getting people IDs. All of my work has been in Salt Lake County, and the way we've created partnerships there has just been reaching out to all the grassroots organizations. And one thing that we found is that a lot of organizations are not communicating with each other, and that is like a massively helpful thing to get people into the social services that they need, and get people the funding that they need and the help that they need. And something that I'm really excited about that I'm here today is my plan is to be in New Mexico for my career. And I really want to bring this project into New Mexico. And I know that it is like a huge problem here as well. And from what I know, that there's not a lot that's being done about it. I mean, it's a very under-researched issue across the entire country. And so I'm kind of hoping being here today gives me the opportunity to kind of create some partnerships in New Mexico where we can start specifically addressing the issue of IDs and getting people working together on that.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess. Yeah, and that's totally the purpose of Impact and Coffee, is to bring organizations who are doing similar things to share what they're working on. And so I'm glad that you're able to take part in this, and hopefully there are connections that you make as well. So thanks for being here. Gilbert, same question to you. What kind of partnerships have you found?
Thank you for that, Michael. Well, I'll have to say that, the city relies heavily on our community partners, and we wouldn't be where we are without them and their support. Much of what we do as administer dollars just as a funder. I appreciate Elena sharing what she's doing with Homewise. There was a time where we honestly don't have a mortgage protection program, and we had to lean on our community partners to say, who could we engage to help us in that area, right? If we're just the pass-through for the funding. And, Homewise has been one of those wonderful partners, and there's many, I'm sure they're on the call. The one challenge when there's crisis is that, there's a threat for organizations to really get siloed. We're trying to stay above all. We're trying to focus on the mission at hand, and crisis, kind of puts a lot of fires in front of us. So as a city, we've had to make sure that we stay focused also, like what are our partners doing and how are we pushing out that information to them as far as what the resources are and how are we bringing everyone together to also leverage whatever resources that we have. That's been crucial. And we did take part in kind of convening. We've already had 2 meetings, but we reached out to the county. We reached out to the Mortgage Finance Authority. We brought in PNM. We brought in the water utility. And we said, look, all of us are the main players with regards to making sure our community has their basic needs met, which is rental assistance and what our programs look like, and also their utilities that not shut off and turn on. And that's been a phenomenal higher level policy as far as what we are doing to kind of come together and talk about what are different pots of money, how are we referring to each other, and what are your criteria. We shared criteria as far as eligibility where we could to kind of change those parameters. Like with CARES dollars, we had a lot more flexibility than we did with some of our CDBG or federal HUD funding. And all of that is just crucial. It's just sharing information. The water utility has released more money, as has PNM, to be able to help individuals with their utility staying on, but making sure that information is shared appropriately, and that when we get a client that comes in and says, I need help with my rental and it's this much, as well as I need some help with utility, to be able to say, well, PNM can probably help you with that utility, and let's take care of all of your rental. That way we maximize our dollars and leverage each other's investments in the community. So that's been great, and it's a partnership that everyone at the table agreed to keep doing as things evolve, as the new administration changes nationally, as the new CARES package was just released. Our most recent meeting was with MFA as well as the county, because there's going to be $200 million that do come to the state with regards to rental assistance, and about 40% of that will go to the 3 largest counties, and Bernalillo County will be one. So all of us had a meeting to kind of prepare and say, what are we applying for and how are we going to leverage and build these programs out? It's also about capacity, right? Like, that's a lot of money to push out the door, and we have to do it quickly. There's a timeline that most of it has to be pretty much not necessarily appropriated, but it does have to either be pre-approved by September. So we're looking at short windows, and again, that could change with the new administration, but we have to go under the guidelines that we were given when it was issued. So having those early meetings, making sure we're leveraging each other to talk, and making sure that if we need to push money out the door via an RFP process to bring on more partners, that we're all talking collectively on how do we do that and realistically get the money out the door. So I can't speak enough to partnerships, communication, bringing each other in. We've engaged the courthouses. They're very aware that the city has a program, that there are other financial resources available, so that we can advocate for our clients and say, please send them to us, as the courts are probably going to see an influx of potential cases that they're going to get a surge. People who are waiting for these evictions, who really, individuals sadly just have not been able to pay, and they want their money. And so therefore, how do we, on the front end, stand up our programs at the door to say, please send them our way, and let's see if we can get their arrears covered before anybody is out on the street, because we don't want to put anyone in a situation where they're housing insecure. So yes, that's about it.
Nice, thank you. And you did bring up a good point too about, working with PNM and the Water Authority and stuff, because those are equally as important as paying rent. So thank you for bringing that forward. All right, Justin, same question to you. You have any, share about any partnerships that you've seen over the past 9 months or so?
Yeah, well, yeah, as I mentioned, we're a very new group and still sort of trying to find all those connections, and I'm very appreciative of being on here, not just with the other panelists, but I'm sure other folks on the call who will say, hey, we want to talk to you about this or that, but we want to be able to connect, you know, have direct contact and stories with renters, and then find, what is it you need? Do you need city resources? Do you need legal help? And then what organizations are attacking the problem from so many different angles? Anything from the like direct social outreach things to we were talking about the legislative session starting today. There's HB 111 is sort of an overhaul of landlord-tenant relations, clarifying all the rights that people have and establishing a council that has some language in there about even including tenants on the council to make sure that all the state regulations and resources are set up to help people.
Excellent. Thank you, Justin, for sharing that. All right, so I'm going to shoot it back over to Robert, who's going to follow up with the next question.
Thanks, Michael. And thanks, Justin, for lifting up the Housing Council. I think that's an exciting piece of legislation and policy that our state really, really needs. I think a lot of our housing agencies don't always collaborate. So having an office that actually, or at least a staffer that would help coordinate around the different agencies would be super, super helpful to help collaboration at a different level and a different scale, and hopefully have some tenant-based representation at that body as well. I think that's super important. I think the one question I had, and this is kind of like a little bit of a kind of an audible, a little bit to use sports terms. Gilbert, I was thinking about some of the things you were saying earlier about evictions are still happening during the crisis. One of the things I know, especially about the bill Justin just mentioned, is how do we strengthen tenants' rights specifically? So when an eviction happens, I understand that there's a 3-day window, or so to speak. So people can't always get the funding they need to kind of with rental assistance in that 3-day time span. Can you talk a little bit, and this is specifically for you, Gilbert, how has the city kind of addressed that inequity specifically? Because I know, it's hard to get the funding in 72 hours. So how do folks, one, how can folks get rental assistance quickly? And then two, what is the city doing to ameliorate that issue specifically?
Thank you. Well, I wish I could say that, a lot of things in city government would happen fast. Unfortunately, they don't. And so that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. We have a wonderful attorney, Karen Myers, you mentioned earlier, who works with financial and consumer protection issues out of our office to make sure individuals have that representation and correct information. One of the things that it takes time is, from the time you come in, we pre-qualify, and then we get the paperwork and documentation to submit. Once you're approved, we're readily available, and typically most of our landlords have worked with us to issue a letter saying, payment has been approved and guaranteed and forthcoming. Therefore, it's enough of a voucher from the city to be able to say your check's coming. We have evaluated our check issuing process, and we've been looking at perhaps bringing that more internal to expedite it. Unfortunately, it goes through one of our banks, and then our bank sends it to the regional office, and then the regional office mails out the check. All in all, that can take 2 to 3 weeks. And so we realize that's an issue for individuals who need that money right away. And again, it depends on the pot of money we're using. We do have a small pot of money that we actually cut the check directly ourselves. So, it depends what they qualify for, and again, leveraging those dollars. But more importantly, the communication. Our team is, and our process right now it's not just an all online web application. We actually have case managers who are sitting with you, going through your paperwork, and then they can make the calls, do the follow-up, and contact your landlord, which is much different from some of the other programs that I know is predominantly online and email, right? You're going to submit your application, you'll get an email that they confirmed it, and they'll email you back saying, we're missing this document, or you're approved or not. Sometimes it does require that base level information, a person calling, talking to the landlord, that relationship to be able to say, the city is now involved, this client is pre-qualified, we can issue a letter of payment, it's coming, they've been pre-approved, we're going to finalize it, and here's the time. Oftentimes that does help. And it really is about, having the amount of staff that you can do it. And I can say, I appreciate my staff. I have 4 centers, 1 in each quadrant of the city, and probably about 4 people at each site. And they have done a tremendous job. They are essential workers. They never close those facilities. They eat food as well. as well as provide space and lease space to other nonprofits. And we have worked to make sure we've added temps, additional phone lines if necessary. It has not been perfect. I'll be the first one to own that, our processes have been hard and people call all the time, and I appreciate them because they give me a pulse on what messaging is going to the community, and we want to improve that. Right. So if we're hearing that they've been denied or that there was waiting list or it was just a busy line, those are things that I get emails on all the time because we want to improve our processes to make sure people are getting access to that. One thing the city has added is we just launched, I think about a week ago, financial navigators. So, we're actually going to have, and this is going to be out of our legal department, individuals who can help engage you to navigate the systems of what might be available. And this can be, it's not just eviction prevention, could be mortgage assistance, could be other things that you're struggling with, and also the court system. So that's going to be a huge add-on to support the community and also help walk them through some of the questions that they're having that we can't always answer because it's legal or it requires an attorney. And it's easily accessible just by calling 311 and saying, I need a connection to the Financial Navigators program. I'm just struggling. I don't know what I need some help. And then they can connect you because these are hard, and albeit we create some of them and then we make it harder. But getting a little assistance to go through that process and someone to walk you through it. It is all via phone, so it's not necessarily in person, but to just have somebody available, which is going to be huge.
That's huge. I really appreciate that. And also just lifting up too, I know it's been difficult for folks. I know I've heard from folks in like the Southeast Heights that have called and like they felt like the person on the other line was like just not hearing it. And so I really appreciate the sense for trying to improve that as much as possible and continuing to improve it too. So appreciate that, Gilbert. For the rest of our panelists, though, I'm going to ask this question because I think it's important also just to brag a little bit. So what are you doing or what have you done that has been successful during the pandemic or that you see as having some longevity for your programming or just for your policy work of any sort? And I'll just kick it over to Elena just to kick us off on this question.
Well, thank you for asking that. And we were surprised actually with what we do kind of in the home ownership realm that wow, this is going to be, take a big hit to housing organizations. And, we initially thought nobody's going to be buying a home during this time or doing anything. But Robert, it was amazing. And people have been resilient. So one of the biggest things is, we are a lender as well. We do conventional financing. And we saw a huge influx of people wanting to refinance. And so people are thinking about how can I stabilize myself? How can I work on money management and budgeting? How can I lower my payment? So those families we've provided counseling for, and in some cases they've taken the opportunity to refinance and save some money and really they can sleep at night because of that. And also, some of the families whose income has been okay, that's been a lot of people, thank goodness. They have really looked at home ownership as we've been kind of preaching over the years. They're looking at home ownership as a really great source of affordable housing. I know we don't talk about home ownership in that way, but it is so true in most parts of New Mexico and still in Albuquerque that, people want to carve out their little place in the world, especially, and I think this pandemic brought this to light. So we did have a lot of individuals and families that they took the plunge and they felt like almost a sense of urgency, if you will, to buy a home rather than being, a renter for many more years and having that question, is my rent going to go up? Is my landlord going to sell the house and evict me? Home ownership just offers that stability. So we have been able to help a lot of families during this time purchase a home. And we just worked with a recent family. Her rent payment was $1,200 and her new house payment is going to be $800. And so she's a single mom with 2 kids. And so you think, wow, look at her monthly budget. Right? She was already living paycheck to paycheck. And so now we're talking to families about how can you do that? And it'll enable you to save more money, get in that savings habit. That long-term financial wealth is so important. And people minority communities, African American, Hispanic, other minority communities. We're talking about that, and because one of the biggest, I think I'll just say this, one of the biggest reasons for the racial wealth gap is home ownership. That is one of the biggest pieces of wealth that we accumulate during our lives, and being able to teach that to our kids or pass it on. I think that this pandemic has really brought this to life, and we're working hard and fast on that with different communities here in New Mexico to keep forging ahead and helping people put down their roots. So that was the biggest surprising thing. Thank you, Robert.
Thanks, Elena. Jess, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, so for this project, it's very new. We've been studying it since August. I want to say that one success I feel like we have is that I know everything there is to know about IDs and getting them and how important they are and what we need them for. And then I just want to say that the second success is that right now, being in a place where I get to educate people that this is an issue and have an opportunity to get to know stakeholders and connect with them and hopefully start working with them to find solutions that are going to work for our communities.
Thanks, Jess. Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, in the few months we've been working, we've done a couple of things to really work on getting people connected with their rights and the resources they can find. The one main event that we did was a webinar in December. Yeah, we had I don't know if anyone knows, Serge Martinez was on talking about tenant rights and the sorts of places you can look for resources. And then we talked about how people can get involved and can really do that, like grassroots, immediate, who you and other tenants of your landlord organizing together if you have some sort of problem. We had a direct conversation with someone at one of our meetings a couple times ago where they've experienced a lot of really, we think unscrupulous behavior by their landlord, and talked them through some strategies of, what neighbors do you have who have faced the same sort of thing? What sorts of protections do you have against retaliation and stuff? And then we're also working on getting out some flyers with a lot of that information. And I didn't mention in the partners part, Democratic Socialists of America, Albuquerque DSA, has stepped up to help us with both printing and translation costs for that, as well as distributing these flyers about knowing your rights.
Thanks, Justin. I appreciate that. I'll pass to Michael to ask us our very last question, and then we'll go to the breakout rooms to network.
Sounds good. So yeah, we're at the last question of the day, and it's the one that we always ask to all of our panelists whenever they're here at Impact and Coffee. And it's, what can this community do for you today? What kind of help do you need that we can provide you with? What kind of, do you want us to call the legislators? What kind of help, what can we do for you today? So I'll go ahead and I'll start with Elena again.
Well, I think, Michael, one of the biggest things we advocate for is information and education. That's really first and foremost. It's so important for families to get that information and education that they need. So I put our website on there, but we have to shift. We had to shift as well. A necessity is the mother of invention. So now that everything has gone virtual and we're not doing in-person classes at this time, we have everything online, which is great. I think our Financial Fitness for Life class is really good for everyone during this time. We have homebuyer education classes as well, but just to really stay on top of things and stay informed. My biggest hope is that families are able to make it from day to day, week to week, having enough food and good shelter and clothing. And I think we all want that for as many people as possible. And so whatever help that we can provide through Homewise, we can do one-on-one counseling for sure. with folks. Everything is private and confidential. We can do some budgeting and money management, and we're also, you know, with all the partnerships that we have, we can give folks a list of resources as well. So I think that we all as a community need to come together and just make sure that folks know, that, you know, have the knowledge to go forward during this crisis, and to feel like New Mexico cares, all of us together, Albuquerque, every city in New Mexico. So yeah, just, and referring people to each other. So I think that's another important thing we can do. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I think just, yeah, making sure people are aware of what resources are out there for them is huge. Yeah, so thanks for that. So Justin, same question to you. What can this community do for you today?
Yeah. Well, one thing definitely is that House bill I brought up, HB 111, supporting that. And, you know, I know if you're like me, you're probably in about 5 different groups working on different things, casually or professionally. And each of those, if they have a legislative agenda, make sure that that is something that at least has been brought up, and look for support on that. In addition, we just want contact with as many renters as possible, especially those who have had any sort of difficulties or questions. I put in the chat a little bit ago, and I'll paste again, our Facebook group, that if you know anybody who is a renter, you know, mainly focused on renters in Albuquerque, but we're happy to talk to folks from around the state as might befit them. Yeah, we'd just like people to know that we're here to have a place for renters to talk to each other and figure out what's going to be best, and find resources and work on things in solidarity.
Great, thank you for that. All right, Jess, same question to you. What can this community do for you?
I love this question. So what I can say is that I have this knowledge and this passion for this pretty niche issue, and all I can ask for is, like, use me. Like, if there's anyone on this call who has experience with this issue and is just like looking for more help and someone to be a part of it, someone to be a part of what you guys are doing, like, I am here for that, and I'm excited for that, and I want to be used.
Excellent. So hopefully you get some contacts today. All right, so Gilbert, if you can kind of wrap us up with this question. So what can this community do for you all today?
Well, one, first and foremost, please take care of yourselves and stay safe. We need all of you, boots on the ground, healthy. We need your families healthy. We appreciate you, and as you know, this mayor's mantra has been One Albuquerque. We really are in this together, and it hasn't showed more since we've hit this pandemic around how we come together to support each other. Honestly, we need you all to kind of be the boots on the ground for those individuals who are struggling the most. It really is hard. We can't do this work unless we pass the information to you, and then you walk them through what their resources are. And we know we are constantly missing pockets or areas where people don't have this information. So I'm happy to share out. A big piece for us is just our criteria. So we have some very easy checklists. When people call, the biggest thing is the pre-qualifier, right? What documents or things do you need to have so that we can figure out what pot of money we can support you with? And I'm happy to share that criteria out, both with this group and to you all. That way that if you're on the ground working with individuals, you can help walk them through, like, these are the things you're going to need ahead of time. Let's make sure you call and then see if we can't get you pre-qualified. But that really is it. You all are our pulse on the ground in the community and what's happening, whether it's great stories to share of people who were able to get assistance, and or if there's systems to change and make better. We know that's constantly happening. And so it's through your feedback that we get that, and we do our best to pivot, change, enhance, and so I appreciate it. We've done a last 9 months or so, and we hope to continue to do more. And we do have more than anything, just so you know, the city has another allocation of money. We had a $1 million allocation right before the start of the year. We have more coming, and so we just want to say that it's available. And it's our job to get you the information on how to access it, what that criteria is, so that you all can help those who might need it. So we appreciate you and thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert, for sharing all that. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Robert, who's going to talk about the breakout rooms and then send us out into the breakout rooms.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks, everyone. So it's now time for our networking portion of it. We're just going to do an automatic breakout room so folks can ask any of our panelists questions or anything like that. And also just for the breakout room, especially, I know, so every one of our panelists will be in their own separate breakout room. Feel free to ask them questions as much as you can and just have a good, vibrant conversation. Some tips, though, I know some folks will have to facilitate a little bit, and that's okay. So just make sure if you're in the room or anybody like that, just make sure that you're introducing yourselves, your name, your organization, but also just like some expectations about like what's a good breakout room. So just make sure that folks don't talk over each other. And one practice that I find that's really helpful in Zoom is this thing called stack. So if you're in a group where lots of conversation is happening, use the chat function and say stack. And that way, whoever's moderating in the breakout room can say like, oh, this person is next on the stack. So it's a little organizing technique for folks. And I know sometimes it's a little confusing, but it's good to use the chat and those functions to make sure that folks get a chance to have a say in the breakout room. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm just going to open it up. It's going to be like a time warp. You'll go into a Zoom, and we'll come back here to the main room in just about 10 minutes. So we'll see in just a little bit. Always it's like doing the time warp all over again. So it's really great to see everybody this morning. I just want to give a big shout out to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very special Impact and Coffee. It means so much that we talk about the housing crisis, the ongoing crisis, and hopefully what we can do to ameliorate the situation for folks in New Mexico. And so I just also want to really thank all of our team at Impact and Coffee, Michael and Danny and Juan and Aaron and Bree, just for working so hard to bring up Impact and Coffee every month for all of you, and to all of our audience too for joining us on this very cold Tuesday morning. This is our last Impact and Coffee for January, so we'll see everybody in the very first week of February. And I hope that our panelists left I know they left their contact information in the chat. You're welcome to leave that again. But check back with our Facebook just to hear the announcement for the next Impact and Coffee. And I hope everyone has a really great Tuesday and a really great rest of your week. If you're going to the legislative session, go up there, advocate like crazy. It's going to be cool. It's going to be awesome. And a lot of work to do up in Santa Fe this year. You can't go in person, just heads up, but you can check out nmlegis.gov for all the legislative pieces and look up all the committee hearings and everything like that. So check it out. And I hope everyone has a really great week, and may all your lights be green. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all so much for having me.